This year, as part of our commemoration of the 150th Memorial Day ceremony in Westminster, we have asked Carroll County families and friends to read letters and correspondence they received from loved ones who did not return home to their communities. We want to mark the 150th event by recognizing and honoring the men and women who died serving their country. We believe that remembrance is powerful, and because it can also be painful, very important. While we observe with parades and flag waving, it's also appropriate to pause and reflect on the history of this event and to recognize the full price of our freedom and our values. And so, these are letters to home.
Hi, my name is Skip Amos, and I'm a member of American Legion Post number 31, Westminster. And as we come up upon the observance of Memorial Day this year, we're reading some letters that came home from people who paid the ultimate sacrifice, which is what Memorial Day observes. We have here today a letter from, and by the way, this year's Memorial Day observance will be the 150th continuous observance of Memorial Day in Westminster. We believe that we are possibly the nation's longest. There's a little community in upstate New York that contests us on that, but we don't think so. We think we're the longest. We started in 1868, and as I said, it's an observance. It's not a celebration, because we're paying tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice. In 1868, the Grand Army of the Republic, which was the veterans organization from those who served in the Civil War, their commander was General Logan, and he called upon the people in America to cut the flowers from their gardens. There were no florists in those days. And take those flowers to the cemeteries and place them on the graves of Union veterans. Here in Westminster, Miss Mary Shellman, who was the daughter of the mayor of Westminster, she was 16 years old, and she organized the children from the two elementary schools that we had in Westminster at that time, one being St. John's Catholic School, which was located where the library buildings are on East Main Street. Then we had the Westminster Elementary School, the public school, which was located at Center and Main. She got the children in those two schools to cut flowers and meet at the Center and Main Street intersection. From there, they walked to the Westminster Cemetery and placed those flowers on the graves of Union soldiers. And that was the beginning of the observance of Decoration Day in Westminster. And this activity continued every May for many, many years, and actually to today. Now, what happened was in 1919, American Legion Post number 31 came into existence. You can see how early it came into existence by the number 31. And Miss Selman had gotten up in age. She wanted to go to live in Texas with her brother. So she got together with the then commander of American Legion Post, number 31, a gentleman by the name of Mitten. And the commander, Mitten, and she started running the parade. And from that time on, she went to Texas. So American Legion Post number 31 has been organizing and running this observance ever since. Now, it's not only the parade. A lot of people don't understand that the parade goes to the Westminster Cemetery, where there is an observance program which has been exactly the same since 1919. And that observance includes the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln, and of course there's someone who's imitating Abraham Lincoln. And that speech that he gave was at the Gettysburg Cemetery when it was dedicated to those Union soldiers. But we have the Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, we have a speech by the Grand Marshal of the parade, We have the playing of the national anthem, and then we have a prayer, and at the end, they play taps, and at the end of the taps, there's a rifle salute. It's very moving, so if you come to the parade, go on up to Westminster Cemetery after it passes by and see the wonderful service that's put on there, and every organization brings flowers, and they eventually are put out on the graves of the Union soldiers in the Westminster Cemetery. Now, what we're talking about here today is this letter that came from a Franklin Underwood Jr., who was serving in the United States Army's 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam. The Underwood family has given us permission to share his last letter home. It starts, "Dear Dad, June the 18th, 1969. You can take this letter for what it's worth. I am now in Cam Ranh Bay 6 Convalescent Center, which is a hospital. Okay, here I go. I have about 40 days left in country, and I was offered a job here. I'll give you the background of how I got it. When I came here, I was made barrack sergeant of 3 wards, which was making sure that the men got their medication and that they were taken care of properly. The NCO in charge was pleased with my work because the words were blankety blank up. I got them in A1 condition that he offered me a job of being the field officer of a company of patients. I thought about taking this job to keep me safe until I got home with my loved ones. I had to make one of the biggest decisions of my life. My platoon leader was also wounded and in Japan, so that leaves my platoon, which I have fought, cried, helped, laughed, and instructed with an E5 sergeant that is a new man in new country and doesn't know nothing to lead my platoon to kill the Viet Cong and the VAN. So I made a decision not to cover my own ass, but to help my men to maybe live and go back to the field and lead and fight. So what I want to say now is, if I get hurt or killed, it was my own decision. We are now in Ashuan Valley, which is in an area that has a lot of Viet Cong and North Vietnam Army soldiers, which we are fighting. My platoon had 3 killed, and I don't know how many wounded. Please take care of Mom, David, and Tom, and especially Barb, if anything happens to me. I'm sure you'll understand what I'm trying to say. My men need me, and I'm sure I can save someone's life if I try. What I wanted you to do is please give this letter to Sergeant Ketchum and let him read it. Dad, Sergeant Ketchum helped me a lot once when I knew that I needed it, and he knows what I am thinking also. Please, may God watch over you and help me. That's the end of the letter. Now I'm going to read the citation that the Underwood family got after this letter. On June the 23rd, 1969, Staff Sergeant Frank Underwood was killed while attempting to aid in the evacuation of his men from a burning crashed helicopter. On August the 25th, 1969, Franklin Underwood was awarded the Soldier's Medal posthumously for his heroism. The paperwork stated that the reason for the award was as follows. For heroism not involving actual conflict with the armed enemy in the Republic of Vietnam, on 23rd June 1969, Staff Sergeant Underwood distinguished himself while serving as platoon sergeant in Company C, 2nd Platoon, 506 Infantry Division, doing combat operation in the Aswan Valley, Republic of Vietnam. At approximately 1400 hours on the cited date, a CH-47 helicopter, in which he was a passenger, crashed into the supply pad at Fire Base Airborne. The crippled ship instantly burst into flames, which ignited the highly explosive fuselage and artillery ammunition stored nearby. With little regard for his own safety, Sergeant Underwood selfishly began to guide the injured personnel out of the burning craft toward safety. By carrying injured men and offering words of encouragement to the others, he aided in the evacuation of 17 men from the burning craft. Fearing that none of his comrades might still be trapped, he remained inside the burning helicopter, valiantly searching for injured personnel. It was during this courageous attempt to save his fellow soldiers that he died. Sergeant Underwood's personal bravery and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. It's very important that we remember these men because they paid the ultimate sacrifice for their country. And in essence, most of the men who pay the ultimate sacrifice do it aiding their own men. They don't necessarily do it for country, God, or their families. They do it for their buddies, the people that they served with. It's a brotherhood. And this is the real courage and the real heroism of our American fighting men. We should honor them, and we do so with each and every Memorial Day. Thank you.
My sister and I have some letters that were written by our father. They were not written to us because I was not born yet, and Joanne was just a child. Well,
3 months old.
very, very small.
Yes.
And
11 months old.
there you go.
Okay.
And the letter I have was the first one that we knew of that our father had written. And it was given to me by our neighbors when I graduated from the 8th grade. And she had saved it for this reason, that it's about me. And it starts off, somewhere in France, February the 12th, 1945. Dear Maddie and Ione and Grandma, I arrived safely, and now that I'm here, I guess it means business. How are you all, and I hope you all are in the best of health, and that the weather isn't too bad. I shall be glad when you get down home for the summer. As you know, I may have to hire a nurse, ha ha. I shall feel relieved, though sorry, that I wouldn't be over on hand to take care of things. But I guess I'd be all thumbs and not much help. At the present, I'm not in a position to see that friend of yours, probably later on when things are quiet out here. I hope he came out okay, and that you've heard from him. We're restricted on most things to put in a letter, and I know you understand, though I like to write and say hello, and to let you know I'm still around, and will be when this is over, God willing. Till I see you all, I shall just say, so long. Love to all, Joe. And he was asking her to be hired as a nurse because my mother was expecting me at the time, and that's why she'd saved the letter for me.
Okay.
Joanne?
All right, this letter was written to my dad's sister and her husband, and they lived in Georgetown, New Jersey, and it was written on February 16th, 1945, somewhere and the country is blocked out, and this was written the day before he was killed. I hope this letter finds you all well and coming along okay. I wrote to Dorothy, who is our mother, and to Dad, his father, this morning, and I'm trying to get one off to everyone. How do things look back there? We have quite a bit of confidence. Have you been to Trenton lately? When you see Dad, cheer him up, and for none of you to worry. I'm in good health and hope to stay that way for a long, long time. How's the weather out there? I hope that you're not having any more snow. The way fuel is being rationed, I guess you'll be thankful when the weather sets in and we're having mild weather here. We're dressed very warm anyway. Have you seen Dorothy, which was our mother, lately? And I wish you'd pay her a visit occasionally. That is, if you have enough gas. That way, you'll be helping me out a lot. I wrote to George the other day, and George was his brother. Have you heard from him lately? I guess the letters that I wrote to him are still following me around. God bless you and keep you safe. Love, brother and brother-in-law, Joe.
And then, just a few years ago, we received from our aunt, his one remaining sister, some information that she'd found when she had been cleaning out a trunk when she moved. And it is a letter to his brother George when he had written to the commanding officer asking about the circumstances of our father's death. And this letter is dated May the 12th, 1945. Dear PFC Seaman, the commanding officer, Company E, 319th Infantry, has referred your letter concerning your brother, Technician 4th Class Joseph Seaman, Company E, to me for reply. Due to his many military duties, it is impractical for him to personally answer all of his correspondence. Your brother was a rifleman in Company E when this organization went into a defensive position in the vicinity of Amelingen, Germany. It was while in this position that the company was shelled by the enemy, and your brother was killed instantly by mortar fire from enemy positions. If at any time we can be of any further service to you, we shall be most happy to help in any way we can. Yours sincerely, First Lieutenant Infantry, William H. Reedwick, Personnel Officer. When we received this, Joanne researched the area, and then I had an opportunity to visit it last summer. It was very special.
Our dad is buried in Henri Chapelle Cemetery, military cemetery in Henri Chapelle, Belgium. And I've been there several times to visit, and you've been there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The reason our mother didn't want him to come home and be buried in New Jersey was the fact that they wouldn't open the casket so she could make sure that it was him, because he was reported missing in action for quite a few months before she finally got this letter. So. Oh, and Carol and I belong to the AWAN Society, which is the American War Orphans Group.
Network.
And every Memorial Day, they put all the military cemeteries, they put wreaths on the graves of the soldiers that were killed. Mm-hmm. So, I have 3 grandsons, and the oldest one is named after our dad.
Thank you both very much for coming.
Thank you.
And for sharing and for honoring him.
Thank you very much.
I'm Leo Eaton, and I've been a resident of Carroll County for more than 30 years now. This letter I'm going to read was sent by my great-uncle during the First World War. It was actually February the 2nd when he visited the Western Front. He was killed at Gallipoli just 2 months later, and he sent this to his family. It was very dark by the time my driver and I came to the headquarters of the Worcester Regiment, 2nd Battalion, who were holding the line at Lourasset. As we were now within 2 miles of the German lines, we had soon to put out our headlights and consequently went very slowly. Continuous rifle fire and occasional gunfire could be heard, and the flashes of the rifles could be seen, while about every 2 minutes a star shell, a blue ball of fire, was sent up from the German trenches, which lighted up the whole place for 15 or 20 seconds. I got to the Worcester headquarters in Smelly-Larry, which did not belie its name, about midnight. I sent my faithful motorcar back. The lieutenant got out of his blankets and got a man to carry my valise onto the dressing station, about 400 yards further forward, where I was to sleep. Just then came a perfect wave of musketry away to the right, where the 4th Brigade, the Guards, were holding the newly captured line in the brickfields just below Lourasset. French guns joined in, and the concert lasted some 20 minutes. It appeared afterwards they were only preventing hostile working parties from carrying out some repairs they were anxious to make. I could just see in the darkness that the east side of one house was in ruins, and that there was a large shell hole in the room where the doctor and I were curling up. But I was tired, and so taking off boots, gaiters, and coat, crept underneath my blankets and slept well. Next morning I woke to the sound of guns and got up about 6:30. Dressing was quite a short affair, but I had a wash and a shave and then went out. It was a wet, misty morning. It was a wet, misty morning. Nothing to be seen but the smell of cordite and mud clung to the mist, and that blood smell from the dressing station, where the doctor had treated some of our boys the previous day. The half-house we'd slept in was a wonderful sight. A high-explosive shell had simply blown the other half to bits, but the outside walls and fragments of the roof still remained. One half was in ruins and roofless, but the 2 ground-floor rooms were all right, except, of course, for the hole, but no ceiling or windows. All the houses about, and there were many of them, were in the same state, but everyone was occupied by the men of the right. Outside in the gardens and outhouses, bomb-proof shelters had been made, and when the shelling got serious, as it did later that morning, the men took shelter in them. I saw a great number of craters formed by the high-explosive shells. They varied in size, some about 10 feet in diameter and about 5 feet deep, others 6 to 8 feet across and 3 to 6 feet deep. Most were filled with water, and the water in the ditches was nearly level with the wet, muddy fields. Everywhere was perfectly flat. The houses and lines of poplar trees or willows along the roads were the only feature in the landscape, except for the haystacks. There seemed a great number of these, and they appeared from the holes around them to attract artillery fire a great deal. Later on, when the fog cleared, I was able to distinguish that a kind of low ridge ran across a mile or so to behind the German lines. Lourasset is on this ridge. Major Lampeter now commands the 2nd Worcestershires, and Charles was his adjutant. They had both been out since the beginning of the war, although Lampeter had been with the 1st Battalion most of the time. The battalion had suffered heavily at Ypres and been reinforced. They were a splendid lot, and not nearly as bored and fed up as I'd expected them, although heartily sick of the present stalemate of affairs. All wanted to know when Kitchener's army was coming and when we could get a push in. Soon after breakfast, the Germans started shelling us, and about 15 or 20 large shells dropped beyond the village. The closest to where I was standing was about 100 yards, but some burst quite close to the house where I'd been sleeping. I stayed and watched them burst, which they do with a fine noise, but none of them did any serious harm. Later that morning, I walked forward with my driver to where the Worcestershires were holding the Later that morning, I walked forward with my driver to where the Worcestershires were holding the line right in front of the German positions. Each company has 8 hours in the firing line during the 8 days they're up on the line. Working parties usually repair the positions from 8 p.m. till midnight, varying the hours to avoid being heavily fired on at any particular time. All day and all night, artillery fire of all sorts goes on. By day, snipers and artillery fire, and by night, constant rifle fire to hinder or stop the other side's working parties. Casualties aren't heavy. The previous night, the Worcestershires had 1 officer, Second Lieutenant Hardy, killed, and 4 others wounded. Hardy was shot stone dead through the head while sniping at the German breastwork. 2 were wounded by stray bullets, and 2 by a short burst from our own guns. There are always a few stray bullets, rovers we call them, from the breastworks about, but they don't usually hit anyone, and the men pay them little attention. That night I went up into the breastworks and took a good look around, but it was very dark, and I couldn't see all that I wanted to, especially as the fog came down again around midnight. Star shells are almost invisible through the mist, just round circles of blue light that reminded me of the lanterns we used to hang from the trees on summer night dances back home. But then the German artillery started up again. Most of the shells fell far away, but one burst quite close and knocked me off my feet. The men around me told me I was exposed up on the breastwork, so I came down and went back to the dressing station, where the doctor was boiling up tea, to which I added a drop of whiskey from my flask, as it was a very cold night. Amazing to think that just a couple of months after he sent this letter home to his family, my great-uncle died on the beaches of Gallipoli. But we remember him through these letters, and that's what it's all about.